Welcome to another episode of Ms. Reed and Aspen's Science and Art. This week we're looking at the world of life and the unseeable in life, the very small parts of life, the building blocks of everything that is alive. So to do that, we're going to look at some petri dishes with things growing in them. We're going to do some observing of microscopic life, photographs from the internet, and we're going to make a little book. Well, I made a little book. I was sad about using up all my good paper, so I made an art book out of catalogs that come to the house. And this is an example of one of the pieces of observational art we're going to do. Maybe it looks better this way. Observational art that we're going to do, and then we're also going to do an abstraction of that using homemade stamping processes, because living cells are somewhat repetitive, and it would be super cool to use a new art technique. So, join us. How do you know that Grim, my bearded dragon, is alive? Is he alive? Is he not? Well, he's moving. Guess what? That's a characteristic of life. All life moves, even trees. They move their leaves in response to light. Well, he's responding to me holding out his food dish, so he's responding to changes in his environment. That's another characteristic of life. He's eating his carrots and raspberries and worms, so he needs energy to grow and thrive. That's another characteristic of life. He does indeed grow. When he was first hatched out of an egg, he was a tiny little guy, and now look how big he is. Let's see, how tall is he? He's longer than my hand. He's about a foot long, about 12 inches or 30 centimeters. He was hatched from a mummy dragon and a daddy dragon who had to get together to make him. So he was a reproduction of some other dragons. So things that are alive reproduce, they make copies of themselves somehow. And I can tell you that every time I give him a bath, he has the biggest gooey poop you could imagine. So I can also say that things that are alive produce waste of some kind, gas or solid or liquid. And someday, after he's lived probably another 10 or 15 years, he will die. His life will come to an end, which will be a sign that he was alive to begin with. You all done there, man? I think you're done. Smart dragon. You want any more? He responds most to food that wiggles. He's thinking about whether he's really hungry. Oh, it's still wiggling. Oh. Really, the most important element of how can we tell things are alive is they need to be made of cells. Cells are the basic building block of life. And I did a little science experiment to grow some cells. I took petri dishes and a gelatin-like substance that has cell food in it called agar, and I went around and sampled some different places where I thought little organisms, one-celled organisms like bacteria or mildew or fungus or mold might be living. I sampled the dog dish and my phone, I sampled my cheeks, I sampled my nose, I sampled the lizard, I sampled the lizard's worms, and this is what I found. I found that the worst place was my lizard worm habitat. See this little rectangle of joy here? That is a solid sampling of what looks to be mold that was growing in with my worms. That indirectly is going right into Grim, and that's not so very good for him, so that tells me I should clean my worms more frequently. I also found on Grim that there was some mold and mildew and some other unidentified yellowish sort of cells. I know that every time Grim takes a bath, he poops all over himself. This is why when you handle lizards, you must wash your hands well, because they are usually coated in salmonella or other kinds of bacteria or mildews or other organisms that aren't very good for us. I also sampled my cheeks. In my cheeks, I found colonies of bacteria and mold, and in my nose I also found bacteria and mold, and so there is evidence that there are small organisms in this house like crazy, and it's supposed to be like that. They say that there are more pounds or kilograms of small single-celled organisms like bacteria on our planet than there are pounds or kilograms of any other kind of living organism. That's hard to imagine. The thing is, some of these, they're not really that bad for us. In fact, some of them are vitally important. If you didn't have bacteria in your tummy, you wouldn't be able to digest food very well. The bacteria in your stomach live in partnership with us. We give them a home and food, and they give us digested food. We also cope with these kinds of organisms by having all sorts of adaptive systems in our bodies. When we have allergies, we're getting rid of, we're having a reaction to pollens and molds in the air and flushing them out of our system, maybe a little over-energetically. And when you get a virus like COVID or the flu or cold, when you get a virus, your body goes into high gear and has lots of sorts of soldiers that it sends out to get rid of those viral cells. So, the presence of cells is a sign of life, and you are made up of your own cells. All sorts of skin cells, hair cells, eye cells, lip cells, teeth. Well, teeth aren't cells, but bone cells. Your body is a highly complex system of all kinds of different cells. And we're going to look at different kinds of cells today. We're going to deeply observe them, do some drawings and some paintings, and then start to notice, hey, you know what? The basic building blocks of life might actually have building blocks of their own. Let's find out. So my samples of grown bacteria, molds, mildews, is that how big they really are? No, that's like a whole city of them. That's why I grew them in a petri dish, to be able to see them. Because the building blocks of life, the cells in your body, are really quite small. Usually we can't see them with the naked eye. We can only see a bunch of them together. In fact, if you think about most of those little samples I was looking at in my petri dishes were mold spores. A whole city of mold spores. Well, what would one little mold spore look like? Well, this is a centimeter. 1 centimeter between my thumbnails. And one mold spore, although some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, generally speaking, in that 1 centimeter distance, you could fit 10,000 mold spores. So we must have been looking at 1 million little mold spores in that little colony that was this big. That's pretty amazing. So, yeah, let's get on to looking at what these things look like under very powerful microscopes. Before we start the art, I want to share with you my my epiphany this morning. I was going to bring out some more brand new printer paper to do my art on, and I'm sad about using all that paper. Meanwhile, I'm busy recycling the magazines that come in our mailbox that I really don't need. So I thought, hey, you know what? I can take these magazines and turn them into my art books, my observational art science art books. So I started painting my pages white. So I'm going to take this magazine that I've already read, decided no, I do not need to buy these things this week, and I'm going to cover them in white paint and then use them as my sketchbooks. Yay! Photograph. So first of all, these are just guidelines. I noticed that the cells are aligned on strips, and they're not like tiny little cells and big fat cells. They were very regularly shaped, which and rather geometric, which is a characteristic of many kinds of plant cells. So I'm going to start, these are not actual leaf lines, but they're going to help me draw my leaf cells properly. Generally, the leaf cells were six-sided, and they weren't completely perfect, but they were fairly similar with each other. Ta-da! All right, so they also are full, some of the cells have a big purple blob. And I'll tell you right now, that big purple blob is the nucleus. That is where the DNA is. That's where the brains of the cell are that tell the cell how to operate, how to grow, and how to reproduce. Then, and I got news, if you can see the nucleus, you can also see the nuclear membrane, because the nuclear membrane, oh dear, is wrapped around the nucleus. So let's just give that, we'll give that a label. This is how we label parts of the cell. We have a little line coming off it, all in the same direction in the drawing, and then a horizontal line that we're going to print on. Then, if we can see the edge of the cell, guess what? We can see two parts of the cell. Because this is a plant cell, we can see... why'd you do that, Mrs. Reed? We can see... let's just do that. That is nucleus and nuclear membrane. this over here is the cell wall. Now the cell wall gives it some strength, and it is special in plant cells. Plant cells have cell walls, whereas animal cells do not. They only have something called a cell membrane, which is more like a little permeable baggie around the outside of the cell. So let's give that a little label here. And it's going to be the cell membrane. And membranes are so cool. As I say, they have like little guardians on the edges of them that let certain wastes out and certain enzymes and energy and nutrients in, but otherwise they keep all the cell contents together. And then if we can see the inside of the cell, guess what? There's like a salty soup in there that lets all the ingredients of the cell float around. It's sort of more of a jello, and it is called cytoplasm. So I'm keeping it parallel to that line, and I'm going to do that. And here's how you spell cytoplasm. Yay! So look how many parts of the cell that we can see just by looking at some beautiful photographs. Now, I didn't talk about the other really important element in this drawing. There were all those wonderful green bloops, green circles that overlapped each other. All right, so they're chloroplasts with chlorophyll. They're the green stuff that makes almost most plants green. It is what absorbs the sun's energy and converts that energy into simple and complex starches. Well, simple starches, like sugars. And really, that's the base of the food chain. So I've started my stamping of the leaves. I'm using a light blue, bluish green, for the cytoplasm of the cell. I'm making sure I do the edges well. And really, the second and third printing are the most interesting. So I've done some scientific type drawings, observational drawings. I've done some painting, stamping, artistic exploration of the shapes of the cells and their contents. Why would I bother doing both? One is quite intentionally observational. The more you deeply observe, the more you will wonder about, gee, I wonder what that little doodad is. I wonder what it does. And then the explanation will be more intriguing, more likely to stick in your head. When we're learning new ideas that are complex, and how life works in a cell is actually pretty complex. the more that you have your own curiosity and your own observations to draw on, the more likely you are to understand it and remember it and be able to use it. I see this in the classroom all the time with students must learn something as opposed to are intrigued to learn something through their own observations. There's all the world of difference.